That's why it's so interesting that you drop a Supreme Clientele 2 at a time like this, because back in 2000 when you dropped Supreme Clientele, there was a lot of people that was like, yo, that saved the Wu-Tang brand in a lot of ways, right? Like really kept that flag held high. Did you feel that pressure when you were making it back then, or you just were in a
Nah, we
creative
were just
zone?
zoning out because you know what happened. Remember how I be saying like, yo, Iron Man was like, they only gave me like a few months to get hit.
Before Ghostface Killah became one of hip-hop's most colorful storytellers, he was living a life that almost ended before Wu-Tang ever took off. The industry knew him as the masked assassin with razor-sharp lyrics, but behind the scenes in the 1990s, Ghostface was juggling studio sessions with a world that was far more dangerous than fans ever realized. In Staten Island's Park Hill and Stapleton projects, Ghostface walked through a reality where every day felt like a coin flip. Poverty pressed in from every side, close friends were caught up in the streets, and Ghostface himself was trying to support a family while navigating a neighborhood filled with tension. These weren't just backstory details. They were the forces shaping his decisions, the shadows behind some of his most intense lyrics. But as Wu-Tang exploded in 1993, Ghostface wasn't fully out of the street life. Behind the platinum records and explosive fame, he was still moving in a world where retaliation, paranoia, and protection were part of daily survival. And that's why, when police pulled him over in 1997 and found a loaded .357 Magnum and a bulletproof vest, fans barely heard a whisper about it. That traffic stop was only the start. 2 years later, Ghostface was back in court, this time actually pleading guilty to attempted robbery in 1999. Yet despite these two serious incidents, his career never slowed down and his criminal record never dominated headlines. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the forgotten story of Ghostface Killah's hidden 1990s crime timeline. What really happened, why it stayed quiet, and how close he came to losing everything before becoming one of hip-hop's greatest legends. Let's go back to where it all began. Ghostface before fame. The environment.
We were all cool and everything, grade school, junior high school, because it wasn't really a fashion show. And but as soon as we went to high school, everybody was just so conscious of their the way they looked, and I didn't have shit, so I didn't like going to school. I didn't have a job. That was the hardest thing to do, because in order to get a job, you need experience. But where was I getting experience from at 15, 16 years old and shit, you know? But I did finally get a job at the Statue of Liberty, which was cool. I worked there for 5 years, made it all the way up to assistant manager. I think, yeah, I was assistant manager. Yeah, I was. That didn't last long because I got hurt and then had to leave and shit. So, but yeah, I worked at the Statue of Liberty, and if I wasn't rhyming, I'd probably have a job right now doing something. Everything's a big check when you don't have shit. But what I did was I compensated for all the shit I didn't have when I was younger. When I was a kid, we used to at Christmas. It got to the point.
Before worldwide fame, Ghostface Killah was just Dennis Coles, a young man trying to survive Staten Island's most dangerous corners. Park Hill and Stapleton weren't just neighborhoods. They were battlegrounds shaped by poverty, tension, and crews constantly clashing for space. In the early 1990s, this environment wasn't optional for Ghostface. It was the world he had to navigate to make it to the next day. Long before he recorded a single verse, he was hustling, scraping together whatever he could to support himself and look after his two brothers who suffered from muscular dystrophy. That responsibility weighed heavily on him, pushing him deeper into situations most artists later try to escape. People who knew Ghostface back then said he walked with a different level of urgency. Someone who understood that one bad decision or one wrong step could mean everything falling apart. Wu-Tang's formation in 1992 didn't instantly remove anyone from the streets. In fact, members have said repeatedly in interviews that even while recording 36 Chambers, they were still dealing with neighborhood wars, police pressure, and the daily grind of staying alive. For Ghostface, that meant bouncing between the studio and the same environment that created his paranoia, sharp instincts, and vivid storytelling skills. Ghostface didn't glamorize the struggle, he lived it. Those early years gave his music its edge, but also kept him tied to high-risk decisions that would follow him deep into Wu-Tang's success. And as the crew began rising, Ghostface's life started moving faster, but the streets weren't done with him yet. 1993 to 1996.
You know. And then how did the Wu-Tang form? Well, that's a crazy situation because we always was together in some form of fashion.
Right.
You know, when Genius and RZA come to the Hill, they come to the U building. And they come on 16. When in front of the U building be me, Meth, you know, Dak, Kappa used to live in the building, so that was our little building. And Ray used to live the building across, right next to it. But he had his gate. You know, him and Power had their gate in the 225.
Wu-Tang blows up while Ghostface stays in the streets. As Wu-Tang Clan exploded after Enter the Wu-Tang, 36 Chambers in 1993, the group's fame reached levels no one from Staten Island had ever seen overnight. They went from recording in cramped basements to touring the world, meeting labels, and becoming the face of a cultural movement. But despite the sudden fame, Ghostface wasn't living like a protected superstar. Instead, he was still linked to the street reality that shaped him, moving between major shows and neighborhoods where old tensions never faded. During this period, Ghostface's reputation grew not just as a lyrical force, but as someone who still carried himself with an edge that came directly from Staten Island Wu-Tang members have admitted that fame didn't automatically erase old habits. Many of them were still hustling, still carrying weapons for protection, and still getting pulled into conflicts that had nothing to do with music. Ghostface was no exception. In interviews, U-God and others described this era as chaotic, full of fast money, fast moves, and even faster consequences. Ghostface's music from this period reflected that dual life. Tracks like Ice Water, Assassination Day, and Can It Be All So Simple weren't just creative writing. They were coded reflections of events happening around him. He was standing on stages worldwide, but back home, grudges, neighborhood politics, and the threat of violence stayed very real. This tension only intensified as Wu-Tang became more powerful, attracting both admiration and jealousy. By 1996, Ghostface was living two lives at once, celebrated artist and street survivor, setting the stage for the first major incident that would bring his double life into the open. The 1997 traffic stop documented incident number 1.
When I see the Beatles still going and Bruce Springsteen and these guys,
Yeah, Rolling Stones.
and it's like, what? You know what I mean? So
Hey, bro, you said it when you said we told them Wu-Tang is forever.
yeah, and then another fan said that too. I thought days forever. My man in the crowd listening to this one fan cry, and he said that, like, yo, I told you. He got even worse when it was the last record and he was about to say peace. I thought they told us it was forever.
In 1997, Ghostface's double life finally collided with law enforcement in a way that couldn't be ignored. The incident started as a simple traffic stop on Staten Island, nothing unusual for the area. But when officers searched the vehicle, what they found made headlines inside police circles, even though the public barely heard a word about it. A loaded .357 Magnum and a bulletproof vest. This wasn't a minor possession charge. It was the kind of discovery that usually turns into a headline, a court date, and possibly years behind bars. For Ghostface, it was a moment that showed just how close the streets still were, even as Wu-Tang was becoming a global force. The details of the case never reached the mainstream press. There were no tabloids, no major rap media write-ups, and no public statements. It disappeared almost as quickly as it surfaced. Those close to Wu-Tang often say the group had powerful legal help and knew how to manage trouble quietly, but the deeper question was why Ghostface was riding like that in the first place. The mid-90s had been a tense period. Beefs, robberies, and neighborhood conflicts made rappers easy targets. Fans saw the album covers and music videos, but behind the scenes, things were more dangerous than they looked. For Ghostface, carrying both a firearm and body armor wasn't about image, it was about survival. This incident revealed how deeply he remained tied to his environment, even as his fame grew, and it wouldn't be the last sign that the line between his career and the streets was thinner than anyone realized. Connecting the dots. Why was Ghostface armed? After the 1997 arrest, one question hung over Ghostface's situation. Why was he rolling around Staten Island with a loaded .357 and a bulletproof vest? When you look at the climate of the mid to late 90s, the answer becomes clearer. Wu-Tang wasn't just a successful rap group. They were a movement with deep neighborhood roots, a lot of street loyalty, and plenty of people who wanted a piece of them. The more famous they got, the more they became targets. Rappers were constantly getting robbed, jumped, or extorted during this era, especially in New York. Being unprotected wasn't an option. Ghostface had already been through years of chaos before the fame. Old beefs didn't suddenly disappear because 36 Chambers went platinum. Staten Island was still filled with disputes that couldn't be solved with a hit single. Raekwon, Method Man, and Deck have all said in interviews that members were constantly watching their backs, even after the world embraced Wu-Tang. They were dealing with jealous rivals, people from their past resurfacing, and situations that escalated without warning. The FBI's later investigation into Wu-Tang only adds context. Years after Ghostface's arrest, federal files surfaced suggesting that some members were being monitored for suspected violent connections and money-related conflicts. While nothing was ever proven, these documents showed just how much tension surrounded the group at the time. For someone like Ghostface, outspoken, respected, and tied closely to the streets, staying armed wasn't about being reckless, it was a survival tactic. The 1997 incident wasn't a random lapse in judgment. It was a sign of how dangerous Ghostface's world still was. Even at the height of Wu-Tang's fame, and 2 years later, things would escalate again. This time into a case that couldn't be swept under the rug. The 1999 attempted robbery charge, documented incident number 2. By 1999, Ghostface Killah had already proven himself as one of Wu-Tang's strongest solo artists, but the streets still had a tight grip on him. That year, he found himself at the center of a far more serious case, one that couldn't quietly disappear like the 1997 gun arrest. Court records show that Ghostface pleaded guilty to attempted robbery, a charge that could have easily derailed his career if handled differently. The incident reportedly involved Ghostface and others attempting to take property from a victim, though the full details were never widely publicized. What made this case unusual wasn't the charge itself, it was how little attention it received. Despite a guilty plea, Ghostface avoided major prison time, landing probation and community service instead. For most artists, especially in New York during the late 90s, this kind of charge often led to significant jail sentences. Yet the story barely made the news. There were no interviews, no press statements, and no damage to Ghostface's momentum. It was as if the incident slipped through the cracks at the perfect moment. The fact that Ghostface walked away with minimal punishment raises questions. Was it strong legal representation, lack of media interest, or simply timing, as rap headlines were dominated by high-profile tragedies and beefs? Whatever the reason, the attempted robbery case shows that Ghostface was still navigating dangerous territory, and that his street instincts hadn't disappeared with success. This was the second major moment in just 2 years where real consequences were waiting for him, and yet something kept him from falling deeper into the system. Was this a crime spree or survival mode? Looking back at the 2 major incidents, the 1997 gun arrest and the 1999 attempted robbery plea, it's easy to frame Ghostface's late 1970s behavior as a crime spree. 2 serious run-ins with the law, both connected to weapons and violence, happening within a tight window of Wu-Tang's rise. But when you dig deeper, the picture becomes more complicated. Ghostface wasn't acting like someone chasing trouble. He was acting like someone trying to survive the chaos that followed him from childhood into fame. His early life was filled with instability, responsibility, and danger. Those patterns didn't vanish just because he became successful. During interviews, Ghostface has admitted that his mind in the 90s wasn't calm or settled. He carried trauma, fear, and a need to protect himself. Wu-Tang's fame also brought a new set of threats: sudden wealth, jealous rivals, and people who wanted access to the group. In environments like Park Hill and Stapleton, anyone showing rapid success became a target. Ghostface's armed protection could be seen less as aggression and more as preparation for unpredictable realities. At the same time, his lyrics reflect internal conflict. Songs like Stroke of Death, Box in Hand, and Nutmeg carry themes of paranoia, revenge, and dealing with enemies, all coming from a place of lived experience. Those themes weren't fictional storytelling. They were the mindset of someone trying to stay alive while balancing fame and old ties. So was Ghostface spiraling into crime, or was he trapped in survival mode? The truth lies somewhere in the middle. He was a man caught between 2 worlds, one that made him a legend and one that threatened to pull him under, and everything would soon shift when Ghostface began to redefine himself through one of his most iconic albums, How Ghostface Escaped Prison. After 2 serious incidents within 2 years, most artists would have been staring down a long prison sentence. But Ghostface Killah didn't just avoid jail. He walked out of the 90s with his career intact and his reputation untouched. The question is, how? The answer sits at the intersection of timing, team strategy, and the reality of how quickly the industry moved during that era. Wu-Tang's rise wasn't just musical, it was organizational. RZA ran the group like a tight operation, and part of that was making sure members had strong legal support whenever trouble surfaced. Behind closed doors, the team was constantly handling issues the public never heard about. In Ghostface's case, both the 1997 gun arrest and the 1999 attempted robbery happened during years when media cycles were overwhelmed with bigger headlines, murders, rap beefs, and high-profile trials. Ghostface's cases didn't have star witnesses, dramatic courtroom moments, or federal attention. They were local New York problems that could be handled quietly, especially with experienced attorneys guiding the process. Plea deals, downgraded charges, and low visibility allowed Ghostface to return to music without interruption. Still, it's important to recognize how close he came to losing everything. A different judge, a more aggressive prosecutor, or a headline-hungry reporter could have changed the outcome. Ghostface's talent didn't shield him from danger, luck, and timing played roles too. His freedom in 1999 wasn't guaranteed. It was the result of narrowly navigating a system that could have easily locked him up. These avoided sentences became a turning point. Ghostface had dodged 2 bullets, and the next step of his career would show a man determined not to let a third one hit. The transformation. Supreme Clientele era. By the end of the 90s, Ghostface Killah was standing at a crossroads. He had survived 2 legal scares, the pressures of sudden fame, and the constant pull of the street life that shaped him. Instead of sinking deeper into chaos, he channeled everything he'd been through into a creative rebirth that would completely shift his legacy. This turning point arrived with the making of Supreme Clientele, the album that didn't just save his career, but reintroduced Ghostface as a visionary artist with a voice unlike anyone else in rap. Ghostface recorded much of Supreme Clientele while traveling, healing, and recalibrating. He battled depression, illness, and exhaustion at the time, forcing him to confront parts of himself he had avoided for years. These struggles pushed him creatively, sharpening the emotion and urgency in his writing. The result was a project filled with vivid imagery, experimental flows, and raw honesty. It was artistic chaos layered over soulful production, a direct reflection of Ghostface's inner world finally taking shape. People close to him have said that this era marked a real shift in his priorities. After nearly losing his freedom twice, Ghostface began distancing himself from dangerous environments and focusing on building something lasting. The anger and paranoia that once fueled him were transformed into some of the most imaginative storytelling hip-hop had ever heard. Instead of looking over his shoulder, he poured everything into the music. Supreme Clientele became a declaration that Ghostface was no longer defined by the streets. He was defined by his artistry. It was the turning point that pulled him out of danger and into the legendary status he holds today. The secret legacy of Ghostface's 90s record. When people talk about Ghostface Killah today, they see a legend, a lyrical mastermind with one of the most unique voices in hip-hop history. But beneath the mask, beneath the wild slang and emotional storytelling, lies a past that quietly shaped everything he became. The incidents in 1997 and 1999 weren't random missteps. They were warning signs from a life Ghostface was still trying to climb out of. A reminder that his rise wasn't clean, safe, or guaranteed. Those moments created the tension, paranoia, and urgency that define his music. His brush with the law didn't destroy him. It added a layer of depth that most artists never have to confront. Ghostface wasn't inventing characters, he was processing survival. The gun charge reflected a man who felt hunted. The attempted robbery plea hinted at financial and emotional stress pulling him towards old habits. And yet, each of these moments became fuel for an artistic transformation that few rappers ever achieve. What could have been his downfall became the foundation of his legend. Because Ghostface didn't run from his past, he carried it into the booth. His storytelling, vulnerability, sharp visual detail, and emotional weight all come from living through a decade where danger was always close. Fans feel that authenticity, even if they never knew the real events behind it. The crime spree wasn't a phase to sensationalize. It was a transitional chapter between Ghostface the survivor and Ghostface the artist. By the time he stepped fully into his creativity with Supreme Clientele, he had already faced consequences, close calls, and choices that could have ended everything. That's what gives his legacy its gravity. Ghostface didn't rise in spite of his past. He rose because he understood it better than anyone else. The cost of survival. Ghostface. Killah's legacy is built on more than classic albums and unforgettable verses. It's built on surviving a decade that tried to pull him under at every turn. The late 90s were a dangerous chapter for Ghostface, a period where fame and old realities collided in ways most artists never talk about. The gun arrest in 1997 and the attempted robbery plea in 1999 weren't stories the press covered, but they were the quiet turning points that pushed him toward change. They showed how easily he could have lost his freedom, his career, and everything he was destined to become. What makes Ghostface's story powerful isn't the trouble. It's how he rose out of it. Instead of being defined by the chaos around him, he converted that pressure into some of the greatest music hip-hop has ever seen. Supreme Clientele wasn't just an album. It was proof that he chose evolution over destruction, that he refused to let his past bury him, that he understood what was at stake. Ghostface's hidden 90s timeline reveals a truth about legends. Their art doesn't come from comfort, it comes from conflict, survival, and transformation. And Ghostface is one of the rare artists who turned real danger into timeless creativity. Today, Ghostface stands as proof that your past doesn't have to be your prison. It can be your foundation. His story reminds us that the line between success and disaster is thinner than most people ever see. And now it's your turn. Do you think Ghostface's near misses in the 90s made his artistry even stronger? Or did he simply get lucky? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit like if you learned something new, and subscribe for more stories that dig deeper into the legends behind the music.